Chapter 8. Operation Malfoy Friendship. It began with a list. Not a written list. Jerry's paws weren't big enough and Tom couldn't hold a quill without turning it into a toy, but a list nonetheless. It shimmered in the air between them one lazy Saturday in the Gryffindor common room, right above the hearthrug where they lay sprawled. 1. Harry equals lonely kid in cupboard, now happy. 2. Ron equals good egg, loud, easily flustered. 3. Hermione equals bossy, brilliant, will save everyone's homework. 4. Draco equals jerk. And yet, Tom and Jerry had seen behind Draco's jerk routine. They'd seen the crumpled letters, the shaking wand hand, the lonely hours practicing by himself. They'd watched him put on that smug mask like armour. It nagged at them. Tom rolled onto his back, staring at the underside of the sofa. Jerry lay on his stomach, chin in paws, tail flicking thoughtfully. Across the room, Harry and Ron were engaged in a fierce game of exploding snap, cards occasionally blowing up in their faces. Hermione sat nearby, trying to read, but her eyes kept drifting over their homework piles with visible disapproval. Draco was nowhere in sight, of course. He lived at the Slytherin table, in the Slytherin common room with Slytherin friends. There were house lines drawn all over Hogwarts, and Draco walked them like a tightrope, toes pointed, chin high. Tom flicked a glance at Jerry. Jerry flicked one back. Tom pantomimed Draco's usual posture, nose in the air, arms folded, mouth in a sneer. Then, more gently, he mimed Draco in the alcove, knees up, hugging himself. Jerry sighed. He hopped up on Tom's chest and started sketching in the air, fingers tracing lines only they could see. Harry plus Draco equals... Then he drew two little stick figures, one with messy hair, one with pointed hair, facing away from each other, arms crossed. He paused. With his other paw, he grabbed the stick figures' heads and turned them to face each other. Then, very deliberately, he smushed them together until their outline formed a big, clumsy heart. Tom snorted. Then he nodded. Operation Malfoy Friendship was born. Step 1. Proximity. Nothing could happen if Harry and Draco stayed at opposite ends of every room, glowering like rival house cats. They needed to be in the same place, preferably without immediate hexing. The first opportunity came at breakfast. The great hall buzzed with morning chatter. Owls swooped between rafters, dropping parcels and letters. The smell of bacon, toast and porridge wove through the air. Harry and Ron plopped down at the Gryffindor table. Hermione sat across from them, already halfway through her porridge, book propped against a jug of pumpkin juice. Tom perched on the bench, tail curling. Jerry hopped along the table, dodging spoons. At the Slytherin table, Draco held court, drawling about something that made Crabbe and Goyle guffaw stupidly. His face was all angles and disdain again, last night's vulnerability locked away. Tom eyed the space between the tables. Jerry squinted, calculating. People constantly moved through the aisle, students, owls, a harassed-looking second year chasing a runaway piece of toast. Chaos. Perfect cover. Jerry rubbed his paws together. He darted to the edge of the Gryffindor table, peered over, then leapt into the traffic like a miniature spy on a mission. He zipped between shoes and robe hems, narrowly avoiding getting stepped on by a Ravenclaw whose nose was in a book. Reaching the Slytherin table, he sprang up onto the bench beneath Draco. Draco didn't notice. He was too busy tilting his head toward Pansy, saying loudly, "Of course, Father says Dumbledore's letting standards slip, the kind of people they let in these days." Jerry peeked up over the table edge. There, right by Draco's bowl, lay a single croissant. Flaky, light, delicious, and crucially, portable. Jerry grabbed it in both paws. It was about 3 times his size, perfect. He heaved it over his head, bent double with the effort, and staggered toward the table edge. Draco's elbow nearly flattened him, but Jerry danced aside at the last second, croissant wobbling dangerously. With one final push, he rolled it off the edge. Gravity took over. The croissant dropped, bounced once on a Slytherin's knee, ricocheted, and shot across the corridor between tables like a buttery torpedo. On the Gryffindor side, Tom had positioned himself like a goalkeeper. He sprang. The croissant smacked into his chest. He clung to it, skidding a little on the bench, then dragged it triumphantly toward Harry. Harry, mid-bite of toast, blinked down at the sudden pastry arrival. "Where did that come from?" Ron asked, reaching for it. Tom slapped his paw on Ron's hand. No, this croissant was not for random eating. This croissant had a purpose. Tom shoved it against Harry's arm, then pointed pointedly across the hall at Draco. He mimed tossing it and two people bumping into each other. Harry frowned, following the gesture. "You want me to throw it at Malfoy?" Tom shook his head so violently his ears flapped. He imitated an apologetic shrug. Then he mimed dropping something near Draco, the two boys both reaching, hands touching, maybe a hesitant smile. Jerry, watching from the Slytherin bench, face-palmed. He scrambled back to Gryffindor, scaling the back of a Hufflepuff like a tiny mountaineer, then popping up beside Harry's plate, panting. He took over. Jerry grabbed the croissant, pointed at Harry, then at Draco, and then mimed the two of them sitting side by side, eating from the same pastry, arms bumping. He fluttered his eyelashes violently. Ron recoiled. "That's disturbing." Harry laughed. "Look, you two, I'm not. Malfoy and I aren't going to bond over breakfast." From the Slytherin table, Draco suddenly realized his croissant was gone. "Hey!" he snapped. "Where's my—" His gaze swept across, caught the telltale flaky arc of pastry in Harry's hand. He scowled. "Enjoy stealing, do you, Potter?" he called loudly. "Very Gryffindor of you." Harry bristled. "I didn't steal anything, Malfoy." "Please, as if you—" The house rivalry flared instantly, like dry straw meeting a match. Jerry groaned. Tom squashed the croissant over his own face in despair. Step 1, proximity. Result, shouting, not sharing. They needed another tactic. Step 2, shared danger. If breakfast diplomacy failed, perhaps a bit of controlled chaos could do what school integration could not. The perfect chance came during a midweek flying practice. Gryffindor and Slytherin were sharing the pitch that day. Madam Hooch supervised from ground level, hawk-like gaze fierce. It was cold. Their breaths clouded the air. Broomsticks shivered in trembling hands. Harry, already a seeker prodigy, was excited. Draco, smug on his nimbus, kept tilting and showing off. Tom rode in Harry's bag to the pitch edge. Cats were not officially allowed on brooms, but hopped out as soon as they reached the stands. He slunk up into the lower rows, tail flicking with tension and interest. Jerry scrambled after him, tiny claws finding holds in the wooden slats. From their vantage point, they could see everything. Harry hovering easily, Ron wobbling a bit, Neville anxiously gripping his broom, Draco weaving through the other Slytherins like a show pony. They also saw something else. A rogue bludger. Someone had left practice balls out. One black iron bludger, heavy and mean, had wriggled free of its restraints in the equipment crate. He slunk up into the lower rows, tail flicking with tension and interest. Jerry scrambled after him, tiny claws finding holds in the wooden slats. From their vantage point, they could see everything. Harry hovering easily, Ron wobbling a bit, Neville anxiously gripping his broom, Draco weaving through the other Slytherins like a show pony. They also saw something else. A rogue bludger. Someone had left practice balls out. One black iron bludger, heavy and mean, had wriggled free of its restraints in the equipment crate. The latch trembled. Then, clank. It burst upward, seizing the open air. Madam Hooch's head whipped around too late. The bludger shot across the pitch like an angry cannonball, straight toward Draco. Perfect opportunity, Jerry's brain said before the rest of him could object. Danger! Harry saves Draco! Gratitude! Bonding! He grabbed Tom's whiskers and pointed. Tom winced but followed the gesture. Draco, laughing at something Pansy was shouting from the sidelines, didn't see the bludger barreling toward his ribs. Harry did. Instinct over rivalry. "Look out!" Harry yelled, diving. He tucked his body, flattening himself along his broom. Wind roared in his ears. The bludger grew larger and larger in his vision. Draco turned, eyes widening. For a heartbeat, time froze. Then Harry rammed his broom into the bludger's path. The impact jarred his arms. The bludger ricocheted off the broom's handle, whistling away to smash into a goalpost with a denting thud. Harry woggled but held on. Draco stared. "You," he began. Harry, out of breath, blurted, "You're welcome," before he could help himself. Madam Hooch screamed at the bludger, swooping down to trap it again with furious magic. On the stands, Tom and Jerry held their breath. This was it. This was the moment. Draco's face worked. For a half-second, his expression shifted, something like surprise and grudging respect cracking through. "Potter," he said, not quite sneering. A thanks hung in the air like an unspoken spell. Then the Slytherins started sniggering behind him. "Scared of a bludger, Malfoy? Needed Potter to save you, did you?" The mask slammed down. Draco's eyes hardened. "I had it under control," he snapped. "Wouldn't expect you to understand control, Potter." "Fine," Harry shot back, prickling. "Next time I'll let it smash you." "Maybe you should," Draco sneered. "Then you might actually win something." They flew off in opposite directions, pride smarting, voices sharp. Up in the stands, Tom smacked his face with his paw. Jerry drew a big X in the air through his invisible shared danger equals friendship diagram. Step 2, shared danger. Result, almost, then ruined by sarcasm. They needed to be cleverer. Step 3, forced teamwork. Humans were funny. They could dislike each other for years and then suddenly become best friends because they'd gotten stuck in a cupboard together or lost in the woods. Hogwarts had plenty of cupboards and more woods than strictly necessary. Tom and Jerry convened a tiny war council behind Harry's bed curtains that night. Tom paced up and down the quilt, tail lashing, pantomiming Draco's sneer, then his secret tears. Jerry scribbled on an imaginary chalkboard, put them in a situation. They must work together. No witnesses. No Slytherins. No Ron getting jealous and yelling. He drew 2 stick figures labelled H and D, then multiple boxes around them. Broom closet, secret passage, stuck staircase. He tapped the last one and looked up at Tom, eyes gleaming. The moving staircases, of course. The plan was simple, in the way all disastrously overcomplicated plans start simple. Tom and Jerry would take advantage of the castle's habit of shifting itself around. If they timed it right, they could get Harry and Draco on the same staircase, mid-shift, and accidentally trigger a lock mechanism that left them no choice but to sit down and talk until someone rescued them. Where was this lock mechanism? It did not exist. But Tom had seen Filch curse a staircase into freezing in place once, and Jerry had watched Hermione examine the gears at the base with scholarly interest. Between the two of them, a little string, a few bits of chalk, and Tom's willingness to throw his entire body weight at levers, what could go wrong? Plenty. They picked their spot, a tall, slightly draughty staircase near the 3rd floor, the sort that seemed to enjoy flipping perpendicular just as you reached the top. At midday, Harry would be returning from Charms. At midday, Draco would be sweeping back from a Slytherin meeting with his prefect. Tom and Jerry set up 2 hours in advance. Jerry constructed a system of tiny pulleys and bits of thread, tying one string to the lower stair rail, another to a nearly loose lantern bracket, and a third to a hinge Filch had repaired poorly. Tom tested them. At the first pull, the lantern bracket creaked. At the second, the hinge shuddered. At the third, the staircase jolted and stopped mid-swing, refusing to complete its move. Perfect, Jerry thought, eyes shining. They'll get halfway up and... He mimed 2 stick figures bumping into each other on the stairs, sliding down to land in a heap, then talking, bonding, finishing with a big heart over their heads. Tom nodded vigorously. He added a flourish. Perhaps a passing gust of wind would dramatically blow their hair together. They scampered into position. Harry came first, as planned, trudging up the staircase with his bag slung over his shoulder and Tom draped around his neck like a living scarf. Jerry scurried along the banister an arm's length ahead, glancing nervously up and down the corridor. Draco arrived beside the staircase from the other side, alone for once. He moved with his usual arrogant sachet, but his shoulders were tense. He stepped onto the first stair at the exact moment Harry put his foot on the third. Timing perfect. Jerry pulled string number 1. The lantern bracket creaked. The staircase began its usual lazy swivel. Tom readied himself, paws on string 2. As Harry and Draco climbed higher and higher, the staircase swung them into mid-air, rotating away from the landing they'd intended to reach. Jerry waited until they reached the middle, then yanked string 2. The partly loose hinge jutted. The staircase lurched to a halt mid-turn. They were left suspended above a 20-foot drop, halfway between floors, with no landing in reach. Harry grabbed the rail. Draco stumbled, caught himself, and whipped around. "What?" Their eyes met. The staircase shuddered once, then went still. Tom and Jerry shared a triumphant look. Step 3, forced teamwork. Engaged. Harry glanced around. "Oh, brilliant." Draco scowled. "What did you do, Potter?" "I didn't do anything," Harry protested. "The stairs moved by themselves." "They don't just stop," Draco snapped. "You've probably broken them. Typical." "I didn't touch anything." Tom, squatting invisibly under the lip of the upper stair, looked at Jerry with a faint sense of dread. Jerry winced. "So," Draco said after a moment of mutual glaring and mutual clinging to the rail, "we're stuck." "Until they move again," Harry said, "or someone sees us." They stood in stiff silence. The castle hummed around them. Far below, a ghost drifted by, humming to itself. Tom and Jerry peered up from their hiding place, willing the boys to say something. A natural and nuanced tone for an authentic conversation. Draco broke first. "Why did you do it?" he blurted. Harry blinked. "Do what?" "Save me from that bludger," Draco said, face twisting as if the words themselves hurt. "The other day." "Oh," Harry said, surprised. Well, it was going to smash you." "You could have let it," Draco pointed out, eyes narrowed. "Everyone would have expected you to." Harry shrugged, a bit defensive. "I'm not you," he almost said, but bit it back. "I don't want you dead, Malfoy. Just less of a git." Tom and Jerry leaned forward, hearts pounding. This was it. This was the beginning. Draco's jaw clenched. "You think you're so noble," he said, "because you're a Gryffindor, because everyone likes you, because you're Harry Potter." Harry bristled. "I never asked to be any of that." "Well, I never asked to be a Malfoy," Draco shot back. The words rang. Tom's ears flicked. Jerry froze on the string. For a second, neither boy spoke. Harry's gaze flickered over Draco's face, searching. He thought of the letter they'd glimpsed, the way Draco practiced alone. Something almost like understanding nudged at him. Almost. Then his own pride and years of Malfoy equals enemy shoved in, loud and insistent. "You don't seem to mind most of the time," Harry said. Draco's face shuttered. "Better than being poor, or being friends with—" Tom flung himself at string 3. A loud twang echoed. The hinge snapped fully. The staircase jolted. For a wild, nauseating second, everyone lost their footing. Harry toppled toward Draco. Draco flailed. They collided mid-stair. Limbs tangled, they slid down 3 steps in an undignified heap, ending up wedged against the rail, breath knocked out of them. Tom and Jerry's hearts leapt. Physical comedy plus forced proximity equals bonding, Jerry's whole body hoped. Draco groaned. "Get off me, Potter." "You're the one," Harry began heatedly. The staircase gave another enormous creak. Then, with a grinding groan, it completed its swing, slamming into the upper landing. They were safe. Too safe. Crab's head appeared at the railing above. "Draco, there you are. Snape's looking for you." Ron's voice floated from below. "Harry, what are you doing up there with Malfoy?" And just like that, whatever fragile, awkward bubble had begun to form popped. Draco scrambled up, yanking his robe straight. "Enjoy your broken staircases, Potter," he snarled, and stalked off with Crab. Harry climbed the last few steps, cheeks pink, muttering "git" under his breath. Tom and Jerry flopped against the underside of the stair in despair. Step 3. Forced teamwork. Result: bruises, insults, no visible progress. They regrouped that night under Harry's 4-poster, Jerry pacing in tiny, furious circles, Tom systematically flattening Harry's pillow with his paws as stress relief. This was harder than they'd thought. They were good at making people fall over, at dropping pies on heads, at turning dignified moments into ridiculous ones. They were not used to hearts being so complicated. Jerry finally stopped pacing. He hopped onto Tom's head, spun around, and plopped down, arms folded. Tom's eyes crossed for a second, then refocused. Jerry drew one more invisible diagram in the air. This time it was much simpler. Step 4. Tiny kindnesses. They couldn't drag Harry and Draco into friendship by main force, but maybe they could nudge. Just a bit, on both sides. Little pushes, little cracks in the walls. They started small. One cold morning, as Slytherins trudged up from the dungeons, shivering, Draco slapped his gloves against his legs and muttered, "Stupid castle, can't they keep it warm?" He reached into his pocket. His gloves weren't there. He scowled and dug deeper. Still nothing. He'd left them behind. He was too proud to turn back. He pulled his robe tighter and set his shoulders. As he passed a tapestry, something soft landed on his head. He swore, hand flying up. His fingers closed around wool. A green and silver scarf. Not his. He glanced around. No one was near. Just a long, empty corridor and a faint, quickly vanishing scuffle sound behind the tapestry. He frowned, turned the scarf over. It was good quality, warm. Charm woven against damp. A tag on the inside read, "Property of H.J.P." He blinked. Potter? Impossible. But there it was. He hesitated. Then, carefully, slowly, he wrapped it around his neck. Tom and Jerry watched from behind the tapestry, hearts thumping. The H.J.P. tag had been Jerry's doing, a carefully inked imitation done in the common room while Harry slept. The scarf itself was one of the extra Weasley jumpers Mrs. Weasley had knitted for Harry, charmed greener by Tom, dipping it in the wrong cauldron 2 days earlier. Half prank, half present. Draco walked away warmer, brow furrowed. Later that day in the library, when Hermione left a stack of books on the table and went to fetch more, a pale hand hesitated near the top one. Hogwarts, a History. Draco's hand. He'd wandered in alone. He looked at the book, scoffed under his breath. Of course she reads this. But his fingers traced the title. Before he could open it, another hand reached from the other side and grabbed it. Harry's. They both had hold of it for a moment. Their eyes met over the pages. Tom and Jerry, balanced on top of the nearby shelf, held their breath. Harry, very quickly, let go. "You can have it," he muttered, trying to sound dismissive. "I know someone who could give you a tour instead." Draco blinked, thrown by the unexpected non-insult. He bristled anyway. "I don't need Gryffindor tours." "Suit yourself," Harry said lightly, and walked away with Ron. Draco watched him go, book forgotten in his hands. On the shelf, Jerry elbowed Tom. It wasn't much, but it was something. The tiny kindnesses multiplied. A quill left on a desk when Draco snapped, Harry's old spare, nudged into place by Jerry's tiny strength. A textbook left open to a particularly useful page about countercurses, Tom accidentally batting it off a shelf as Draco walked by. In potions, when Snape's new fabulous persona was in full force and Draco's potion thickened dangerously, threatening to explode, a last-minute pinch of heretofore unadded ingredient, courtesy of Jerry leaping from Harry's sleeve to tip a vial, saved it from disaster. Draco stared into his cauldron. He knew he hadn't done that. He also knew Snape had been too busy belting out, "Stop staring in the mirror," at a Hufflepuff to notice. He looked around suspiciously. Tom and Jerry pretended to be extremely absorbed in Harry's own bubbling potion. Human stubbornness being what it was, none of this created instant best friendship. Draco still insulted Ron. Harry still snapped back. Snide remarks flew across classrooms. But every so often, in between, there were pauses. Moments when Harry caught Draco watching Hagrid's hut with something almost like curiosity, not scorn. Glimpses of Draco hovering a bit closer when a prank of the twins went off, as if making sure first-years didn't get caught in the crossfire, before sneering and stalking away. Once, in the courtyard, a couple of older Slytherins jostled a tiny Hufflepuff, sending books flying. Before Tom and Jerry could launch their usual gambit of tripping the bullies, Draco's wand flicked. "Watch where you're going," he drawled at his own housemates. Their shoelaces tied themselves together mid-step. They crashed into each other, sprawling. The Hufflepuff scooped up their books and bolted. Draco turned away, mouth curling, pretending it had been about his own dignity, not theirs. On a wall above, Tom and Jerry exchanged a new kind of look. Maybe they couldn't force it. Maybe they didn't have to. Maybe all they could do, for now, was keep poking holes in the stories everyone was telling themselves. Harry's story, Malfoy equals enemy. Draco's story, Potter equals rival. Maybe, one day, those holes would widen enough for light to get through. Until then, Operation Malfoy Friendship continued in the background of everything. In between classes and Quidditch and researching the Philosopher's Stone, Tom and Jerry nudged, tugged, tripped, and occasionally sabotaged their way through small, silly schemes. They accidentally tangled Harry's broom bristles with Draco's on the broomshed rack, so that when both boys grabbed ropes to pull them free, they ended up yanking on the same knotted less, grumbling side by side. They redirected an enchanted snowball meant for Percy so that it smacked into Draco and Harry at the same time, covering both in identical icy splats, and forcing a shared startled burst of laughter before pride could stop it. They herded a herd of charmed chess pieces into the corridor between classes, sending everyone scrambling, and watched as Harry and Draco automatically fell into mirrored positions, shouting instructions to panicking first-years, momentarily on the same team. Every time, afterwards, the old habits reasserted themselves. A sneer here, a mutter there. But Tom and Jerry saw the hesitations. They saw Harry's eyes linger a second longer on Draco's slumped shoulders when he thought no one was looking. They saw Draco's fists clench when other Slytherins mocked Scarhead a bit too viciously, only to relax with a practised sneer. On a particularly quiet night, Harry fell asleep halfway through a game of wizard chess, Ron snoring into his pillow, Hermione mumbling spell names in her dreams. Tom curled at Harry's feet, tail tucked. Jerry sat at the head of the bed, gazing at the curtains. In his mind, he drew that original list again. Harry equals lonely kid in cupboard, now happy. Ron equals good egg. Hermione equals will save everyone. Draco equals complicated. He underlined the last word, then doodled a tiny stick figure cat and mouse between H and D, holding up a sign that read, "Friends?" with a giant question mark. Tom, half asleep, peeked with one eye, saw the question mark, and reached out a paw. He turned it into a heart. Not a big, perfect heart, a lopsided one, a work in progress. A natural and nuanced tone. For a much colder room, Draco Malfoy lay awake staring at the dark canopy above his bed, one hand absently wrapped around a green and silver scarf he definitely wasn't admitting had become his favourite. He thought about bludgers and letters and hands that had shoved him aside or reached out. He scowled at the dark, because that was easier. But when he finally drifted off, somewhere in the muddle of his dreams, a boy with messy hair and a stupid scar wasn't quite as villainous as before. Operation Malfoy Friendship had not succeeded, not yet. From the outside, nothing much had changed, but Tom and Jerry, expert observers of humans and all their ridiculous breakable hearts, could feel something shifting underfoot. Like the castle staircases they knew so well, people could be stubborn. They could also surprise you, years after you'd given up on them. And if they did, if someday Harry and Draco ended up on the same landing of their own free will, Tom and Jerry knew they'd be there, somewhere close by, invisible or not, making outrageous kissy faces and cheering them on in their own silent slapstick way.